Welcome everybody to the Accelerate Your Sustainability Journey, Why Bother and Where to Start session. I'm Sarah Henderson, and I have with me here today Ms. Donna Schweitzer. And I will just do a quick introduction of myself, and then we can jump back to Donna's introduction. I've been working in environmental health, safety, and sustainability for over 20 years. And I'm very passionate about the connection between EH&S and sustainability. And so is my friend, Donna. We've been doing these presentations this is our third year in a row, Donna.
I know, can you believe it? We're trying to drag you all along with us.
Yep, we're trying to give you some more information so you can take this back to your workplace. Go ahead and give your introduction, Donna.
So I'm Donna Schweitzer, and I have also been working for over 20 years in the environmental health and safety and sustainability industry. And you can find me at beyondcompliance.consulting.
Great. Well, we have a very simple agenda here today. If you read the abstract, I'm assuming you did, and that's why you're joining us here today, especially since our session is like the last one of the entire conference. So thanks for taking the time to join us. We are going to cover today the reasons to do a sustainability assessment. And then we have a special tool that we're going to share with you that can help do the sustainability assessment. And then we're going to go over some case studies and of actual companies doing sustainability and what their scorecard from the assessment might look like. So there has been a shift, and everybody is shifting towards sustainability. 5,200 of the largest companies across 52 countries are carrying out sustainability reporting. 80% of them are carrying out these sustainability reportings. So Donna, let's get started and talk to our audience today about why this shift is actually happening.
Sure. So one of the reasons these companies are shifting is because the data shows that sustainability delivers. So you'll see here a chart that shows that companies with strong ESG performance, ESG means environmental, social, and governance. So if they have strong performance in ESG, they're shown to outperform their counterparts that have no ESG or low ESG performance. They outperform them financially by about 32%. So
wow, that's a strong connection.
I know.
Financially. Wait, you're saying that there's like a tie between sustainability and financial performance?
Yes, there is.
Wow.
And we're just starting to see that now since, the 2000s. There's a definite discrepancy, I want to say, between those two types of companies, the ones with weak ESG performance and the one with strong ESG performance. So by having an effective sustainability strategy, you can either reduce risk or create differentiation for your brand. And for example, when you reduce or eliminate a hazardous waste stream, which we all have probably done in our past, you reduce your risk of future cleanups. Alternatively, if you have an important community impact, such as creating a public access park on your property, you're creating brand loyalty. Think of the example Patagonia provided relative to their brand and outdoor space conservation.
That's a brand I love. I love Patagonia.
I know, I do too. And they really support people who like to be outside, and that's who their market is towards.
That's perfect. So one reason that we can talk about why businesses should do a sustainability survey, or at least start driving towards sustainability, is because of financial performance. And I think we all know as EH&S professionals that some of the other things that also reduce are part of sustainability are reducing energy and waste costs. And I don't think this is something that's new to EH&S professionals. We're doing that every day, right, Donna?
I think so, yes. You should be.
Awesome. I think if you were a business owner in 2020, you understand that risk is pretty unpredictable and ever changing. So projecting risk and reducing risk, wow, that's pretty tough. But it seems like some of our sustainability initiatives will help us reduce those risks. Even loss of permit or loss of your authority to operate, those are all risks. Fines and litigations, those are things that we're very familiar with. But sustainability reporting will help you look at those risks and reduce them corporate wide. Another reason to start looking at doing a sustainability survey is employee retention. Employees are more loyal, more engaged, and more productive when their organization is a force for good. Again, Patagonia, great example. They're a great force for good, and it's on issues that they care about, the outdoors.
That's right. And Patagonia was one of the first companies, I'll just throw this aside in here, um, where they had on-site daycare facilities for their mothers who worked for them to reduce that burden for the employees that they found were value added to their company.
That's great, showing their values for their employees by having
Ex-
daycare.
exactly.
Another reason to do a sustainability survey is for increased revenue and opportunities and for increased brand reputation. I think everybody knows what this picture is there on the screen. People are extremely loyal to the Apple brand and the Mac users. And some of that has to do with their product offering, but it also has to do with their brand reputation of doing good. And of course, there are increased business opportunities when people love your brand. So they want to purchase the most sustainable goods and services from the most sustainable suppliers that are doing the least harm and the most good. Donna, I'm going to throw out a couple other brands that I like, and maybe you can think of some others too.
Okay.
There's one out there, Levi. Have you heard of Levi's?
No, don't think I have.
Yeah, I was buying some new school clothes for my son, and Levi's had a sustainability page. And I was looking on there and their commitment to stop using some of those small microplastics in their company, in their production.
Hmm.
Love ThreadUp. They're a company that is like vintage clothing, but it's consignment almost, like it's secondhand clothing. So some of these companies are doing great things, and I keep going back more and more, and they're for their products because of their great reputation.
Yes, I agree. Unilever is another important company that's doing these sustainability work, and that Unilever might not be immediately recognizable, but they have brands like Ben and Jerry's and Dove, and those are their brands that when you think of them, they conjure up things like, Ben and Jerry's is about, pure ingredients, and they have a very strong sustainability program. And Dove is about women and empowering women and making women feel good about themselves, regardless of, what the media might be telling us to feel about ourselves. So.
Wow, that is good. When I think of Ben and Jerry's, I do think of Vermont, but I also think of Chunky Monkey and some of their other amazing flavors.
I know. Yep.
So some of the other reasons to do a sustainability survey is access to funds and attracting investments. So this is really linked right back to what you originally started talking about, Donna, that sustainability does impact the bottom line.
It
So
sure does.
an organization's disclosure of its social environmental performance and its preparedness for social and environmental crisis like a pandemic and maybe climate change, that's something that people that have the capital or the funds to invest in them are looking at and will sometimes give preferential treatment because they're like a responsible organization to invest in.
Yes, and you'll see more and more in the news that investors are making more demands. So Larry Fink, shown here, is the CEO of BlackRock Investment, and BlackRock Investment manages $7 trillion. That's with a T.
Wow.
Right. And Larry Fink sent a letter to their clients stating that companies that are not managing their climate risk could be affecting their company's long-term profitability. So not only is the data showing that strong ESG performance is giving you financial stability, but we're also seeing that investors are demanding to know what your ESG risk is and how you're managing that. So regardless of whether your company is public or private, because really the companies that we've been talking about here are pretty big companies and they're mostly public offerings. But regardless of whether your company is public or private, investors are asking why they should be giving their money to you. And increasingly, investors are asking how you're managing your ESG performance and how that compares to your peers. So it could be a double-edged sword. If your peers are doing it and you're not, then from what the data shows and what the trend is, investors are going to be more likely to invest in your peers. If you are having strong ESG performance and you're transparently reporting on that and your peers aren't, that is setting you above the rest of your peers. And
Oh,
investors are taking notice of that.
absolutely.
So, and there's some techniques and strategies that investors are using right now, and here's a list of them. So there's exclusionary screening, which means that an investment company could remove your company from their investment portfolio if there's a contradiction in a social or a moral value. So if you think that, let's say tobacco, if your company is involved in the tobacco industry, you may be excluded from an investment portfolio because the investors have a moral or a social issue against smoking or whatever their
Tobacco usage. Wow, that's interesting.
right. So, but you could also be screened into an investment portfolio if you're transparent about your ESG factors and and they are shown to be material to your financial performance. Just like I was mentioning, if your company is doing is reporting on ESG performance and your peers are not, then there are some investment companies that will look at you to include your company into their investment portfolio. Thematic investments means that there's companies that want to invest in programs and projects like clean water, clean air, emissions reduction, that kind of thing. Impact investing means that a company is going to seek a measurable um, social or environmental return as well as a financial return. And then you have shareholder activism, where your shareholders are going to be asking you for better performance in certain areas that they're have strong opinions about. And I want to give you an example of that happened just this summer. Engine number one is a small shareholder that holds about 0.02% shares of Exxon Mobil, which
Mm.
is a $250 billion company. So that doesn't seem like a very big shareholder, does it?
No, it does not.
Well, they grabbed 3 board of director seats this summer. And so now they have 3 representatives basically sitting on the board at ExxonMobil, and that's a quarter of their board positions. So they've got 12 board members, and this engine number one has 3 of those seats. And engine number one is an investment firm that aims to transform the economy by driving positive impact. And they think that ExxonMobil must better position itself for long-term sustainable value creation. So I think that we're going to be seeing some different trends in the ExxonMobil business strategy in the coming months and years.
Yeah, it just goes to show the different impacts that come onto companies, like, and their decisions and what they need they need to do. So that shareholder activism is pretty important. What I think there's some other ones up and coming that we've been chatting about.
Well, right. So the House just passed an ESG disclosure bill, and that also happened this summer. It's called the Corporate Governance Improvement and Investor Protection Act. And, we're in a heavily regulated industry, right? We all know that regulations drive change. I mean, just look at what happened when the EPA was created, right? And OSHA was created. I don't know how many of you remember the Enron affair and the Sarbanes-Oxley Act
Oh
of
yeah.
2002. Well, interestingly, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act was called the Public Company Accounting Reform and Investor Protection Act. So it's funny
That's a
how,
mouthful.
I know, right? But it's funny how the government is protecting investors with all of
Hmm.
these regulations. But what this bill is trying to do is to make public companies disclose certain ESG disclosures on their SEC filings. So that's your Securities Exchange filings. So it talks about ESG metrics, climate disclosures, political spending, that kind of thing. So this is really new. It has not become law yet. It still has to pass the Senate, but this is coming. We're going to be having to disclose this kind of information because it's being demanded right now.
Wow. Yeah. And I think I love what you said originally. Legislation does drive change. But I'll tell you, Donna, this makes me a little bit nervous because I became an EH&S professional because I don't love to deal with finances, right?
Right.
So now we got to figure out how my line of work is really impacting these companies' bottom line and their reporting and their compliance again. So maybe it's a little bit outside of our normal wheelhouse, but it's something that I think these organizations are going to be coming to us with these types of questions. And they're going to need some help
I agree.
because sustainability can be very complex. Have you ever even gone on the web and tried to get a definition for sustainability? I think it's pretty confusing. And even when I talk to EH&S consultants and professionals, sometimes they say, yeah, that's just greenhouse gas management, right? And we all are learning along the lines, but that's not necessarily true.
That's correct. All right.
But there are dozens of frameworks out there for sustainability to help you plan, manage, assess, and report on all of your sustainability efforts. And that can be a little bit confusing too, right? You mentioned the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, but now we have the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures
Mm-hmm.
and SASB, which is the the accounting board. Um, of course, the UN SDGs, the GRI, Future Fit, B Corp, the list goes on and on. There's lots of frameworks. So that can be very overwhelming. But as we've said before in some of our other presentations, right, there's good news for us because you don't have to report on all of it, right?
That's
We're
right.
gonna we're gonna decide what's important to your organization, and then we're gonna help you communicate. But some of the things that we want to talk about today is helping you define what's important again, and talking about what frameworks you might want to be using. And over the last year, Donna and I have spent some time looking into what kind of assessments might be helpful to EH&S professionals. And I learned about a free open source tool through some reading and blogs that I was reading about. And then coincidentally, Donna learned about the same tool through a class, sustainability class at Villanova.
Mm-hmm.
And so we came together and we thought, you know what? Let's make sense of this ourselves and bring it forward to our EH&S friends and family through the HMP and tell them about this amazing tool. We're calling this the Drive to Neutral assessment. And basically, this assessment will help companies score progress towards that driving towards neutral. And by neutral, we mean causing no harm to people and the planet. And this tool will help give the organization some credit for all of the good things that they are doing. And then furthermore, it will help you take back the information that you learn from the assessment to your diverse group of stakeholders.
Yeah, it's a really good tool.
So yeah, the intended users of this assessment are any business sizes. So small businesses, medium-sized business, and even large organizations with minimal or no sustainability staff on board. So small, medium, large can be used for anybody in any sector in any country. So it's a great tool.
I agree, Sarah. And the good thing about this tool is it asks you a series of questions, and there's no right or wrong answer. You just have to answer how your company is addressing those particular
Absolutely.
topics.
Yeah, this assessment is definitely looking at the best case scenario, right? 100% is you're causing no harm. But if you're getting below 100% on some of these questions, that's okay too. And above 100% means you're doing really good things. But
Right.
before we dive in a little bit, I really loved this picture of the UN SDGs. Do you want to talk about it a little bit? I love the bottom there.
Sure. So the UN SDGs, the United Nations, came up with Sustainable Development Goals, and they were originally developed for as a focus for uh, governments. So like how cities could manage their development. And the good news about these sustainable development goals is that companies have been embracing them as well. And you've probably seen us put a picture of the sustainable development goals up. It's usually in a box, and there are 17 of them, and they go through different topics. But I really like this picture because it shows that all of the societal and economic um, goals are dependent on the biosphere. And that is smack where you and I as EHS professionals fall. We're taking care of the water, we're taking care of the land and the climate and the air. So we have to get that right first before so that we can lift up all of the other goals in the process.
Yeah, I think I've always tried to explain why I felt like hazardous materials management was so important for sustainability, but that picture really sums it up. I
I
like it.
agree. Yeah.
So we are all familiar with ESG, right? Environmental social governance. But what our little assessment will do is kind of break each one of those down into the core sustainability factors that go into each of the ESG discussions. So just showing you those here as a high level visual of it, and then we're going to jump into each one specifically. So for the environment, we're going to talk about what sustainable organizations do or do not do for each of these things in the environment. So sustainable organizations do not use energy that is, I guess we'll say carbon based. They're trying to use as much renewable energy as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't use net water from stressed areas and try to ensure that all discharged water is adequately treated. Of course, water, we're concerned about it. Procurement processes. Sustainable organizations use a process to get the best value for the money while purchasing the most sustainable goods and services from the most sustainable suppliers. So that comes and impacts our environment as well. Of course, we're all familiar with greenhouse gas emissions, and sustainable companies are tracking scope 1, 2, and 3 greenhouse gas emissions. Now, you want to try to eliminate those emissions, but right now that's not possible to eliminate them all. So you just want you to start thinking about tracking them, setting goals, and setting a baseline. In our previous discussions, Donna, we talked about collecting data and getting baseline data for sustainability assessments.
Right.
In our scorecard here, there are questions that will lead you right to making those efforts happen. Have you set a goal for reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Yes or no? Have you met those goals? Yes or no? Even starts even further with that. It's like, hey, are you even tracking greenhouse gas emissions? So it's a really great tool to help you evaluate how your company's operations are impacting the environment.
And Sarah, I'd like to pause here for a second and talk about scope one, two, and three greenhouse gas emissions. Scope one emissions are basically what your operations are emitting. So that would be your boilers, the cars in your fleet. Scope two is your purchased energy. So that's the electricity that you buy, the natural gas that you may be using for your building. And then scope three is really the hardest one to quantify and also the hardest one to control because that is really the emissions from your supply chain. So, getting your product to the door, getting your product to your customers, and those kinds of things. So those are the different scope one and two and three. And I believe that the scorecard helps you evaluate which ones of those you're good at and maybe need some improvement on as far as data collection.
Yeah, it absolutely does. So it does help you get those baseline data points for scope one, two, and three. And also for your waste, right? So we're all tracking solid waste, sometimes liquid and gaseous emissions as well. And we're already doing that as the H&S professionals. We're tracking, our biennial reports for our hazardous waste, our tier twos for some of our other storage and information on site there. So we're already doing some things like this. So I think when we sit down and take this assessment, there's going to be some sections that are a little bit easier than others. We're going to have the information, and some of them are going to be a little bit more difficult. But
And you know what? Not having the information is a data point, right?
what do you mean by that?
Well, it could mean that if you don't know what your greenhouse gas emissions are, maybe that's a project that you can consider for the future, that we need to start tracking that and get a baseline so that we can move forward.
I love that. Yeah, it's something that you put on your plan to put on a goal. Let's start tracking all of our emissions.
Exactly.
Very good. I think that we can move on to the social. Yeah, so social is just as important in the environmental, but maybe isn't as a comfortable of space for some of us, our EH&S professionals.
Hmm.
Some aspects are, some maybe not. I know for myself, I'm pretty comfortable with the health portion of that, the health and safety. But at first I was like, well, I just want to work on the environmental part. But really, these are so intricately um, pieced together that you have to look at all three. So under the social aspect, we're really looking at for organizations how they treat their employees. So do they pay their employees at least a living wage so that they can afford a decent standard of living for their families? Are they providing a safe and healthy workplace? And health includes physical health, mental, and even emotional health for their employees. Making sure that they have fair employment terms aligned with human rights. I know in one of our last presentations, we talked about Coca-Cola building a stadium and in another country and making people work and not giving them the right to leave.
Hmm.
Those kind of employment terms are not fair, and sustainable companies don't engage in those kind of activities.
That's right.
And also, of course, making sure that you have a discrimination-free workplace that's diverse, which I love this picture that's up there.
Hmm.
And of course, sustainable organizations never undermine the social and economic well-being of neighborhood communities. So there's on our assessment, there's questions associated to each one of these areas within the sustainability factors to help let you know where you stand on some of those factors.
That's good.
Yeah, and then the next thing that is on the survey and the assessment that we want to talk about is actual governance. So sustainable organizations are always making sure that their governance is embedded into the choices that they make and the management of their company. They make sure that they're paying the right taxes at the right location and at the right time. Of course, we expect all sustainable organizations to behave ethically and to not lobby directly or indirectly for conditions that undermine progress towards our UN Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, as we've talked about a lot today, is impact investing, and sustainable organizations do participate in impact investing. And impact investing is just investing that is based on companies, not just focused on profit, but also focused on the outcome of their money doing something good. So I think we covered all the ESGs. There's Donna. Anything else you want to add to any of those?
Yeah, I did want to say one thing. When I've been having conversations about sustainability, a lot of people are saying to me, it's just the flavor program of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I think is different about the sustainability strategy movement that I'm seeing going on is that it is embedded in the C-suite, in the boardroom. It's being discussed, all of having a good strategy around sustainability coordinates with your business goals and objectives. So if your only business goal and objective is to make money, then you get your sustainability goals around reducing your costs.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's not just a flavor of the day, but it's actually supporting your business goals as your company's moving forward. So
Yeah, I think everybody's in business to make money, right?
of course.
It's so if you can use the sustainability to show your C-suite, especially using a tool or an assessment tool that doing the sustainability strategy or having a sustainability strategy or program will actually help improve your bottom line, they're much more likely to listen to you.
Yep.
So I think the results of the scorecard would enable any of us, whether we have a sustainability title or are listed as a sustainability champion or not, to talk to our leadership and share with them about where we're at, maybe setting this baseline and how to continue to approach eliminating, harmful toxins or harmful impacts on the environment, on their employees, and on society. So it gives you a place to do that. So after you take this assessment and answer all the questions in the categories, the assessment's going to come back and tell you if you're 100% in each of these categories, or if you're less than 100% in each categories, or if you're more than 100% in each categories. So if you come across and in the energy category, your organization is at 100%, then you're not causing any harm. If it's less than 100%, say 80%, then it just shows that your organization is working towards not causing any harm in the energy sector. And if you're more than 100%, then we're calling that enablers, and the organization is actually being restorative and regenerative and enabling these certain sectors or factors in positive ways. And so I think you can take that information and take that back to your C-suite, your leadership, and open up the conversation.
Sarah, we were talking about an example of being more than 100% in electricity. Did you want to go over that again? So what if I'm 110% in energy, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for energy, if you're over 100%, it means that you're doing more good than harm. So let's say you put solar panels on your facility and you generate enough power with those solar panels to power your entire production of your facility, but there's leftover power. Maybe you power a little bit more, and that 10% more that you don't use goes to the grid, and it actually allows the community to use that power. That would be an example of how a company could score more than 100%.
That's right. That's great.
Okay, and really, I just wanted to show these slides to connect those UN Sustainable Development Goals to the ESG. Again, it's very similar to the slide we had before. I think sometimes when we see the UN SDGs in that periodic table format, it gets a little overwhelming. But here you can actually look at the environment and how that's labeled here as natural capital, and society as social or human capital. Employees are human capital. And then again, the environment and some natural capitals there. So if you're looking at those and those sections, and you can look at your scores and have the insights to evaluate if your company is contributing or inhibiting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Again, it's just another way to spark up that conversation and talk to your leadership and accelerate your organization's transition to a more sustainable business model. Just gives you a place to start implementing change for the results with this assessment and the data that you already know that you already have.
It's a really
So
good way to look at it.
yeah,
I think that puts it's a very, gives you a very clear picture of where your gaps are and where your strengths are.
yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to look forward at some of the companies that we want to do a mock assessment on here with our case studies.
Okay,
So
we'll run through this real quick. So Microsoft. So Microsoft is a company that, you know, they provide goods and services. What do you think their potential results of their scorecard would be? Where do you think they would be strong or have gaps?
yeah, that's a good question. So if I think about what's important to Microsoft, I know that empowering people to take on their own destiny and having a computer on every individual's desk,
Mm-hmm.
and also knowing that their CEO or their founder, Bill Gates, is also very interested in climate change. I would guess that they would probably score pretty high. They get maybe 100% on most of the items in environmental, social, and probably governance as well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that they probably do strive to score high. I think that they're probably a really energy intensive company. And
Yes,
so maybe that's one of the opportunities for them. And as it turns out, Microsoft does want to focus on their carbon emissions. And um, I'll do one more here. So basically what they're pledging to do, which is interesting, is that they want to remove from the atmosphere all the carbon it has ever emitted since it started operation in 1975. So this would be another excellent example of being more than 100%, right?
absolutely.
Many people are saying, oh, net zero emissions or,
Mm-hmm.
zero carbon, and that would be 100%. But trying to remove from the atmosphere carbon, that puts you above that 100%, and that is doing good and creating value. And I wanted to just point out here that one of the ways they're doing that is they are sourcing projects that will remove carbon from the atmosphere. So not only are they working on their own operation, but they're trying to support companies that are developing technologies to do that. And I think that's wonderful. It's kind of like they're putting their money where their mouth is, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's move on. So what about the city of Los Angeles? Here's a
Hmm.
picture here. What do you think the city of Los Angeles would be important to them? I mean, how do you
Oh, well, I would
what are the
think,
impacts of a
whew,
city?
air pollution, right? That's what I think of when I think of Los Angeles is air pollution, right?
That's exactly right. The city of Los Angeles is trying desperately to improve their air quality. And so their sustainability plan includes cutting unhealthy air pollution, the number of days that they have on unhealthy air pollution. Um, they're doing that by using legislation and trying to implement innovation and conservation. And one of the things that I found was pretty interesting was that I don't know if you've been to LA, there's a picture up there of their concrete river, which goes, right through town, and it's miles long. And they are talking about restoring that back to vegetated swale
Wow.
as opposed to concrete. So not only are you, you know, decreasing emissions, but you're creating a carbon sink, because we know that green is a carbon sink. So I think that's pretty awesome project plan.
That is pretty awesome. I hope they're going to use like electric bulldozers and stuff.
Well, that
There's
remains to
always a
be seen,
cost, right?
right? Exactly. Okay, so how about Coke? What do you think about Coke? What would their focus be, or what would be an important factor to them thinking about your scorecard?
Oh, well, this is an interesting one because I know that they've had some employee type
Mm-hmm.
problems across the
Mm-hmm.
world.
Mm-hmm.
They've definitely had some water issues, but they're also a huge company that has a huge sustainability staff, right? So would it help them to do the scorecard? I mean, I think it would. It would help them focus on the issues that are important to you, but I'm going to go with water. I would say is probably their most
Yeah, water. Water
water's
is.
it.
Yep,
Hmm.
water's it. And really, you're right though about the social aspect. They've run into some pretty interesting snafus along the way. But one of the things that they were running into was, water is their main ingredient, right? So
Hmm.
they were pulling water out of these communities that had were water insecure, and because they're a business, if you have a drought situation, and that the town asks you to curb your water use,
Hmm.
businesses don't usually fall into those kinds of restrictions, because they argue that it's their livelihood, so they shouldn't have to worry about it. So what Coca-Cola has been doing is trying to be regenerative in its operation, and provide and implement and replenish healthy watersheds.
That's a great parent.
So they are, yeah, so their focus is on water.
That's interesting. I like that under resilient communities, however, so they are looking at their community impact too, and they're saying, 13.5 million lives improved already. So they are looking at things under governance,
Yes,
as well as things that are under the environment.
right,
So across
right.
the board, they found what matters. What
Yep,
else do you
they did.
have?
So Subaru, they make cars.
Yeah, I like Subarus.
Yeah. What do you think their focus would be?
So what I always think about when I think of Subaru is their zero waste. Like they're trying to keep stuff out of landfill, which because I have a waste background, I was like, well, great, you're probably just burning everything, right? So I'm always curious to understand their balance. Would love to have one of their corporate organizations take our survey.
Yeah, so the interesting thing about Subaru, they do have a zero landfill policy, and they were, and I questioned the same thing. Are they just
Mm,
taking it to a waste to steam facility,
sure.
and that's it? But they didn't. They really didn't. They went back and they worked with their suppliers to send them different types of packaging, and they have a take back program with their packaging, and they changed the way they were oiling their parts so that it was wiped on instead of sprayed on. So they
Amazing.
had, yeah, so they had a lot less. And the interesting thing is that they are now working with the national park on a similar initiative at some of the national parks around the country, where they're trying to reduce the waste coming from the national park that's going to landfill using the same kind of thought process. So not only did they reduce waste, but they also kind of generated this side hustle, right?
Yeah.
Where the national park has hired them to help them with their initiative. So pretty interesting, kind of shows you the offensive value creation, brand improvement when you're thinking about sustainability issues.
Yeah,
So
I love that.
Campbell's is a local Philadelphia, well, New Jersey company. What do you think there would be important to them?
Healthy things, healthy eating, healthy lifestyle.
You're absolutely right. So zero hunger is really
Mm,
the sustainable development goal that they're after, and they're supporting um, programs that have this same type of focus, and they want to keep it local as well. And I did speak with a representative from Campbell, and he was saying that, as a company, they just kind of threw money around the community without any, if someone came to them and said, oh, support our baseball team, and they
Mm,
would, right? But
right.
after they got their sustainability program together, they focused on this healthy communities in our hometown. So it was a hard couple years where they had to say no to people that they had been
Mm.
financially supporting over the years historically. But what happened was, having this focus on this healthy communities, and with a food and nutrition focus, helped them support their organizational goals.
Wow, and that does give a great perspective to sustainability, right? Making sure that
Exactly.
you continue to support your community through a program rather than just tossing around some money here or there. It's great.
Exactly. Yep. So I believe my last example here is BD Medical, which is a supplier of medical equipment
Yeah, medical
generally.
devices. I'm
Yep.
very familiar with this company. So,
Yes.
yeah, I'm going to say healthcare and global health and wellness is probably there first.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that they are very passionate about is increasing access. So helping people have access to healthcare. Um, and there was a statement in their sustainability report that I pulled out here that I thought was intriguing. Was we profoundly respect that what we do is good for the is for the good of the people. So I thought that was an excellent quote that supported um, their goal of
Yeah.
advancing the world of health.
Wow, that's a good one. So on our assessment, we would have looked a lot at the employee side, but then the employee health, or not so much employee, but health and wellness um, overall of the globe. That's a tricky one,
Hmm.
but a good one to show.
Yep. Yep. And then I just wanted to throw this up here, because as part of sustainability and the social factors that come into that, there's diversity and equity and inclusion. And I just wanted to show some examples of companies that are getting it right. And these were listed in the U.S. News and World Report. And this kind of shows that people are putting their money where their mouth is. They're not just saying we accept all people, but they're hiring these people to run their company. And so I just wanted to show some logos here.
Right. I
Um,
think the important thing about this one too, Donna, is that we know that those logos aren't perfect, right?
right.
Because we've heard stories about Starbucks, we've heard stories about GM, right?
Hmm.
So the point being is that there has to be strides and that it is a journey, and that using a scorecard or some sort of sustainability framework will help you advance that journey. It
Yep,
just kind of gives you visibility into where you're at on that journey and how you can move forward.
exactly.
Very good. Well, I think we've covered most of our slides today.
I did. Yes, I agree with you.
Very good. Well, just some final thoughts from us, and that's just whether or not your organization is big or small, medium or large enterprise, public or private. It's definitely your environmental social governance and your sustainability strategies are being scrutinized by your stakeholders, whether that be your investors, stockholders, your consumers. It's all being looked at. And utilizing the scorecard will give you some insight into being able to take some data back to your leadership. Even if you're being asked, or even if you're not being asked to do that, they might be interested in seeing what some of the results are. You want to talk about being a benchmark?
Sure. So, um, basically, after you go through the scorecard and figure out maybe where your gaps are, one of the things that you can do is benchmark what other people are doing. And that's why we gave you the case studies here, because there's lots of different people doing different things, to improve the natural world and improve their business opportunities, and helping or benchmarking against what other people doing may also give you a path forward in helping you to achieve what you'd like to accomplish based on your scorecard results.
Yeah, especially in your own industry, it's always good to benchmark off of others.
Well, right, and at the point we made earlier was that investors are looking at that very thing. So you should know know what your enemies are doing.
Frenemies, right? For sure.
Frenemies, exactly. So
Well, we would like to make sure that everybody who is attending the session knows that we are here to support them. We would love to hear from you. We actually would love to walk through this scorecard and assessment with anybody that wants to do that with us. That free of charge will help them walk through and look at their results if they're interested in making that commitment.
agreed. Thanks, Sarah. I appreciate the information shared
Yeah,
with me.
always enjoy sharing with you as well, Donna.
Yes.
Okay,
And
I
thank you
guess,
all for attending. And we hope you have a good, well, we hope you had a good conference since this
yeah.
is the last session of the day. So
And I guess we'll take questions on the live portion. Thanks,
thank,
everybody, for joining.
thank you very much.